Iran is facing one of the most severe water crises in its modern history, a crisis that is quietly unfolding but threatens to affect millions of lives in ways that are irreversible. Water, the most basic requirement for survival, is becoming dangerously scarce across large parts of the country. Rivers that once sustained ancient civilizations are drying up, reservoirs are shrinking at alarming rates, and groundwater levels have fallen so low that some regions may never recover. Experts warn that if current trends continue, nearly 15 million people could soon be living in conditions where access to clean and reliable water is no longer guaranteed. For thousands of years, Iran's geography shaped its relationship with water. Much of the country lies in arid and semi-arid zones, where rainfall has always been limited and uneven. Historically, Iranians developed sophisticated systems to manage water, including qanats underground channels that transported water from mountains to dry plains. These systems allowed communities to survive in harsh environments for centuries. But today, those ancient solutions are no longer enough to withstand the scale and speed of modern water depletion. Climate change is one of the most powerful forces driving Iran's water crisis. Rising temperatures have increased evaporation rates across the country, while precipitation patterns have become more unpredictable. Winters that once brought snow to the mountains now bring rain or nothing at all, reducing the slow snowmelt that traditionally fed rivers and aquifers throughout the year. Summers have become longer and hotter, placing immense pressure on already strained water supplies. Droughts that once occurred every decade are now happening far more frequently, leaving little time for natural systems to recover. Yet, climate change alone does not explain the severity of the crisis. Human mismanagement of water resources has played an equally destructive role. Over the past few decades, Iran has pursued aggressive agricultural expansion in regions that simply cannot support it. Water-intensive crops such as wheat, rice, and sugarcane have been promoted even in arid provinces, draining rivers and groundwater reserves far beyond sustainable levels. Massive irrigation projects, often poorly planned, have diverted water away from ecosystems and downstream communities. Groundwater extraction has become one of the most alarming aspects of Iran's water problem. As surface water sources dried up, farmers and industries turned increasingly to underground aquifers. Millions of wells, many of them illegal, now pump water from beneath the ground at a rate far faster than nature can replenish. In some regions, groundwater levels have dropped by tens of meters. This over-extraction has caused land subsidence, where the ground literally sinks as underground water is removed. Entire villages have experienced cracked buildings, collapsed roads, and irreversible damage to farmland. Iran's rivers tell a tragic story of mismanagement and decline. The Zayandeh Rud, once a lifeline for central Iran and the city of Isfahan, now runs dry for much of the year. Bridges that once crossed flowing water now span empty riverbeds filled with dust. The Karun River, Iran's longest and most important river, has been heavily dammed and polluted, reducing its flow and threatening communities in the southwest. Wetlands that depended on these rivers, such as the once vast Lake Urmia, have nearly disappeared, leaving behind salt flats that create toxic dust storms. Lake Urmia is perhaps the most striking symbol of Iran's water crisis. Once one of the largest saltwater lakes in the Middle East, it supported wildlife, tourism, and local economies. Today, much of the lake has dried up, its water level reduced to a fraction of what it once was. As the water vanished, salt concentrations rose dramatically, killing aquatic life and rendering surrounding farmland infertile. Winds now carry salt and chemical dust into nearby cities. increasing respiratory illnesses and making life increasingly difficult for residents. Urban areas are not immune to the crisis. Major cities like Tehran, Mashhad, and Shiraz are facing severe water stress. Tehran, home to more than 8 million people, relies on reservoirs and groundwater that are rapidly depleting. Authorities have repeatedly warned that the capital could face serious water shortages if consumption patterns do not change. Aging infrastructure compounds the problem, with significant amounts of water lost through leaks before it ever reaches households. The human cost of Iran's water crisis is already visible. In rural areas, farmers are abandoning their land because they can no longer grow crops or support livestock. Entire communities are being forced to migrate to cities in search of work and water, placing additional pressure on urban resources. This internal displacement is creating social tensions, unemployment, and overcrowded living conditions. In some regions, competition over water has sparked protests and clashes, reflecting growing frustration and desperation among the population. Public protests linked to water shortages have become more frequent in recent years. In provinces like Khuzestan, where temperatures soar and water quality has deteriorated, residents have taken to the streets demanding access to clean water. These protests highlight how water scarcity is no longer just an environmental issue, but a political and social one. When people cannot meet their basic needs, trust in institutions erodes and instability grows. Health risks associated with water scarcity are another major concern. As water supplies shrink, quality often deteriorates. Contaminated water can spread disease, while limited access to sanitation increases the risk of outbreaks. In hot climates, lack of water also raises the danger of heat-related illnesses, particularly for the elderly and children. For millions of Iranians, water scarcity is becoming a daily threat to health and well-being. Economically, the water crisis threatens Iran's future. Agriculture employs a significant portion of the population, and water shortages are undermining food production. Reduced crop yields increase dependence on food imports, straining an economy already under pressure. Industries that rely heavily on water, such as steel and petrochemicals, face operational challenges that could lead to job losses and reduced economic output. Experts warn that without urgent and comprehensive reforms, Iran could face a scenario where large regions become effectively uninhabitable. Some estimates suggest that up to 15 million people may be forced to relocate over the coming decades if water scarcity continues to worsen. This scale of displacement would be unprecedented in the country's history and could destabilize the entire region. Solutions to Iran's water crisis do exist, but they require difficult choices and long-term commitment. Reducing agricultural water consumption is essential, even if it means shifting away from traditional crops or changing farming practices. Modern irrigation techniques, such as drip irrigation, could significantly reduce water waste. Enforcing regulations against illegal wells and limiting groundwater extraction are critical steps, though politically challenging. Urban water management must also improve. Repairing aging infrastructure, reducing leaks, and promoting water conservation could save vast amounts of water. Public awareness campaigns are necessary to change consumption habits, particularly in cities where per capita water use remains high. Recycling wastewater and investing in desalination for coastal regions could provide additional sources, though these options come with financial and environmental costs. Perhaps most importantly, water management in Iran requires a shift in mindset. For decades, water was treated as an unlimited resource, something to be controlled and exploited. Today, it must be understood as a fragile and finite asset that demands careful stewardship. Cooperation between government agencies, scientists, farmers, and local communities is essential to create sustainable solutions. The clock is ticking. Every year of delay makes the crisis harder and more expensive to fix. Aquifers that collapse cannot easily be restored. Ecosystems that disappear may never return. The choices made today will determine whether future generations inherit a livable land or a country struggling to provide the most basic necessity of life. Iran's water crisis is not just a national issue, it is a warning to the world. It shows how climate change, poor planning, and overconsumption can converge to threaten millions of lives. Water scarcity is becoming one of the defining challenges of the 21st century, and Iran stands on the front line of that struggle. If meaningful action is not taken soon, the question will no longer be whether Iran is running out of water, but how many lives will be uprooted by its absence. For 15 million people and counting, water scarcity is no longer a distant fear. It is a reality that is already shaping their present and threatening their future.